In this episode, we chat with Caleb Cline, an impressive, relatively new ultra cyclist with an inspiring backstory. Caleb is a graduate of the prestigious West Point U.S. Military Academy and served in the U.S. Army for 9 years, 3 months, and 20 days. After suffering injuries in the line of duty, Caleb kept pushing the boundaries as a disabled veteran, motivated to not let his circumstances interfere with his potential. Since receiving his first Trike bicycle, Caleb has been able to compete in ultra cycling events from the NCOM 375 in Texas to the Silver State 508 in Nevada. Most recently, Caleb won first place in the 24-hour Trike category at the Virtual World Time Trial Championships, completing 375.10 miles. Caleb's story is sure to make you reconsider what's possible in your own life. I'm your host, Justin Tu. Let's roll. Hey Ultra family, Justin Tu here, your host today of the Ultra Cycling Show. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode with a very special guest, a U.S. Army veteran. He was an infantry officer for 9 years, 3 months, and 20 days. He was a West Point graduate and also a participant in the recent 24-hour World Time Trial Championships and also the Silver State 508 and the NCOM 375. It's the one and only Caleb Cline. Thanks for joining me again on the show, Caleb.
Good morning. I'm glad to be here.
Had a lot of fun with our sprint round event recap for the World Time Trial Championships recently. For those who haven't checked that episode out, I'd highly encourage that you watch that. But today we get to dive really deep into who Caleb Cline is, your backstory, how you became an ultra cyclist, and where the road is leading for you. But before we get into that, let's get started with a sprint round of questions. A series of fun questions to get to know you in a nutshell. And of course, the first question is, how long have you even been riding bicycles?
I think for most of us, we all started as kids. I actually used to ride in the skate parks with my dad. When I was in 7th and 8th grade, we would go on a Saturday morning, load the bikes up and drive across town. And that's kind of what started my passion for bikes in a nutshell. I even remember my first bike with training wheels was a Power Ranger bike.
Wow, that's so cool. That's a great way to start. How long have you been an ultra cyclist now?
So I've been doing this for about 6 months. COVID actually allowed me to get a trike from the VA through recreational therapy because we were riding in a group setting at a park, but obviously that was not an option. And so I was out riding one day and I had just completed with Team Hoyt, was doing basically a virtual run across America, but we were also allowed to bike. And so we did a relay event and I only had to do, I want to say 2 miles a day, which for my personality, I decided that was not enough. So I was running, then I started cycling and was out one day and decided, I wonder if I could ride across America. This is something that I had always thought about and considered. And my hopes and dreams of cycling at one point were gone, and we'll get into that. But as I found my love again for cycling and the ability to do so on my recumbent trike, I thought, I wonder if I could do this. And so I hit Google and was ready to sign up for Race Across America with literally zero training or any idea of what was ahead of me, and then found out I had to qualify, and that's how I ended up at the Silver State 508.
Story. Yeah, it's a great progression. A lot of us follow a similar kind of journey through our ultra cycling careers. Now, you mentioned your recumbent trike. I wanted to show a couple photos to give folks an idea of what that is as we get rolling here. And the next question is, how many bicycles do you own? Is it just the single trike that you currently own?
Currently, yes. But actually, and what I'm very excited about is at the end of this month, a close friend of mine and the only other recumbent ultra tricyclist that I know, Mark, is going for the actual world record in person at Borrego Springs. And so since there's not many of us that actually ride trikes and do this in the ridiculous fashion of ultra distance, whatever he does will be the record. But he did the 24-hour virtual with me, and he had a couple issues physically. He's very much more broken than I am. And so he called it quits at about 250 miles, I want to say. But I'm now going to go be his crew chief for his world record here at the end of the month. And then at the end of that, I actually had the bike shop Bent Up Cycles make me some custom carbon front rims for my current trike. And so I'm going back there to get sized up for my next race machine, which will be fully carbon. And that will either be the Ice Trike VTX or the Bachetta. And I'm looking forward to having a second so that I can leave one on the trainer and have one for outdoors. And that will also, actually, my bike's currently at the shop because I had a mechanical issue on my long ride on Sunday. And so I would have rode today, but I only have one and I don't have it. So,
Yeah, well, it's a great machine that you do have. And here it is on the trainer. Looks like you're doing some Zwifting there.
yes, I'm a big Zwift fan.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Now, here is Bad Boy. Nice setup. Looks comfortable and also dialed in. It looks like you even have some disc brakes on there.
Yes, performs very well for me. Cat Trike 700. I put a HED disc in the back, and then I have just a reflective vinyl cover on both sides, which comes in handy when I go into tech when they ask me where all my reflective tape is. And I was like, if you miss this back wheel, we're already in trouble. So,
yeah, true. Now, I saw there on your setup, you've obviously got a bicycle computer. Wondering what brand do you use? One of the popular ones, Garmin, of course. Wahoo's another one.
I'm a big Garmin fan, and reason is I have all my products that I have are Garmin, and I wanted stuff that would easily communicate together. So Garmin power pedals, the Vector 3s, the dual-sided. I have my watch as well, and that's how I screen a lot of my phone calls, text messages, emails while I'm riding. Also, I get heart rate off my watch on my phone. And then I use the 1080 for two reasons. It's got the longest lasting battery life. And I wanted something that was easy to see, especially because really none of our races are any shorter than a day in 24 hours time. So when I did the 508, I actually hooked up the external battery pack in the back and allowed it to charge while I was still riding on my second day.
Nice. Yeah. Got to have that long battery life. It's essential for ultra cycling. Gets challenging sometimes. Now, you were talking about your wheels earlier. I'm curious, what size tire do you use and what's your preferred tire pressure?
So I'm actually at 25 millimeters for a couple of reasons. My old shop that I used to ride for, he recommended that we go with 25 millimeters because we're cutting down a little bit of weight and drag in the front. In the back, I would have gone wider up to 28, but they didn't have it when I went to buy the tire. So we matched it at 25, no big deal. And I usually run about 100 PSI, and I've learned the hard lesson of not making sure that I was at the correct tire pressure before I went out on a ride, because changing a flat on this thing, especially in the back, is not fun. So I've become quite a stickler for ensuring that I check before I take it out on the road every single time.
Yeah, I can imagine, which reminds me, I actually have to check my rear tire. I've had a slow leak the last 3 or 4 sessions that I've done outdoor. And fortunately, I have a good electric battery powered pump actually. And so it saved me a lot, but I do need to change that out myself. All right, Caleb, what gearing do you use on your trike?
So this setup is a 10 speed. I am looking to upgrade that potentially to E-tap in either 11 or 12, depending on my spacing in the rear. My next trike it'll come 11 speed, and then whatever I decide to stick with, I'll stick with the same across the board. I think Christoph made a great point in his podcast was whatever you have, it's easier to change when you've got, issues with tires and things like that, or you need to swap rims. just to swap the whole thing. And so keeping everything the same across the board will be ideal, especially as I get into these multi-day events. I don't want to have to figure out, well, I've, made the wrong choice, bought this expensive wheel, but I can only put this on one bike and maybe I'm riding the other bike. So.
Yeah, true. It does help a lot. We've had several guests on this show, including Nancy and John Guth, who have similar setups between all of their bikes that they own together as a couple. And of course, Christoph Strasser, our co-host, he has 2 other interviews where I've interviewed him individually, episode 37 and 49, for those who are interested in learning more. A lot of wisdom there. But of course, even in the episodes he does with his own guests, there's just so much experience and wisdom to garner, especially for those of us who are looking to do things like the Race Across America, and quite frankly, any ultra cycling event. Okay, Caleb, I'm wondering, do you have a coach? Do you train by time or distance?
I do have a coach, Matt Hoffman. He seems to specialize in training those of us who are broken yet determined. He took the first and only hand cyclist across America in 2017, Andre. And so when I failed to complete 508, Rob Panzera, who is the race director and was Matt Hoffman's crew chief for 2015, when he soloed Race Across America, said, you've got the grit and obviously you have the drive, but you don't really know what you don't know. And at that point, I had been riding my trike for 6 weeks. So he linked us up and we just kind of talked through. He trains me via Training Peaks, and right now we're training for time. Whether that changes, obviously, I think will be up to him. Before the last virtual race, I used his guidance generally, but he wasn't giving me anything specific. And so certain things I would go out. If I was going for distance, especially that being an indoor race, I did a lot of indoor training. So, I do 100 or 200 miles for time, or 50 miles or FTP test, et cetera. So I did a lot of Zwifting, some full gas, just to make sure I was familiar with the program. And but now we've transitioned. I'm looking forward, as the weather gets nice back here in Vegas, to getting back outside. And as much as I love the pain cave, I like seeing other things besides these race numbers and medals, et cetera, behind me. So
yeah, sounds like a good training program and some good coaching and mentorship there. You did mention Las Vegas, so you do live here in the US, of course, in the state of Nevada. And I'm sure there's some good heat training out there during the summertime, especially for you. So you'll be all prepared for a lot of the weather conditions and extreme heats in the desert going through Arizona and in the beginning of Race Across the West and Race Across America. So, of course, you have a power meter. You're training with that. You do an FTP test now and then. Do you know what your latest FTP number is, and perhaps even your power to weight ratio, or maybe we could even calculate it?
Yeah, so I'm a heavier individual, 6'2", race weight's about 205. My FTP right now, right before the 24-hour Worlds, was 275. So I don't know whatever that math is, because I just pedal hard until I'm done. So I'm looking forward to getting back to doing another one. I've actually been working with the shop owner from Reno, who fixed my bike in the 508. We'll get to that story a little later on. But he helps me with all my data interpretation. So obviously my biking seating position, et cetera, is a lot different than everybody else's. And so we've been working to dial that in specifically for me to manage efficiency, power, and then trying to maintain a good balance in pedal stroke to make them almost as identical as possible. So I will test again. I try to do it about once every other month. So just to kind of see a progression and go from there.
Yeah, that's great. Definitely taking your training seriously, which is very important. Now, I did some calculations here. So you said you're about 205 pounds. In kilograms, that's 92.9864. And your FTP is 275. So 275 divided by that 92 number, it's about a 2.96 kilograms watts per kilogram. So that's a good number there. And I'm sure it'll only improve as you keep training and racing also. All right, Caleb, some of the fun questions. First one, what's your favorite ride snack? What do you like eating on the bike when you're training or racing?
I've always gone back to the chocolate chip Cliff Bar. It's consistently fills me up and lasts a while. Um, I also like to munch on different candies to kind of just maintain a higher glucose level throughout, especially my ultra rides, whether that be Sour Patch Kids, Swedish Fish, or something along those lines. Quick burn. Also, just kind of breaks up the monotony of eating Cliff Bars because after a while that gets a little old.
Yeah, it definitely does. I've been a longtime Cliff Bar consumer myself in the early years, especially. Have since switched, of course, like many, to liquid hydration, those kinds of things. But it sounds like some good snacks you've got there. Now, coming to hydration, what do you like drinking when you're biking?
So I use a product called Slay RX, and especially the Diesel Plus, which has some caffeine infused in that. My old triathlon team that I was a part of in Georgia was sick of having athletes have issues with their stomachs and heat, especially racing there in summer. And so we actually came up with a product, and I am an ambassador for that. And so I really love that product. They even have a smaller kind of energy shot that I use called a spark plug. So those are kind of my main fuels. I alternate bottles, one Slay RX, one water, and just to kind of maintain a good balance of hydration over really my training, my racing, and I found that to be pretty effective.
Yeah, that's great. You got to find what works for you. It's very important. So, how about after a nice long hard ride or the virtual World Time Trial Championships you participated in? What's something that you look forward to eating afterwards? Your favorite post-ride meal?
Four by four animal style from In and Out is always my go-to. Slam as many calories as I can. Throw in a chocolate shake if I'm really being adventurous, and then I also ate after Worlds. I ate a large Italian sub from Capriati's, which is about 20 inches. So I know you asked me how many calories I burned. I burned about 10,000 and took in about 10,000 during that race. But then I probably ate close to 10,000 after just to kind of rebuild. So my crew chief says this is basically an eating contest on wheels, and I think that's pretty accurate.
That's a good way to describe it. That's really funny. Yeah, the famous In and Out burgers, of course, for those watching who aren't familiar with that, it's a really great chain of burgers here in, I think, primarily the California, right?
Yeah, California, Vegas, Arizona. It's basically all West Coast.
Right, yeah. And so the 4x4, describe what that is for those who don't know.
So it's actually four patties stacked on top of each other, a layer of cheese in between, pickles, lettuce, tomato, and then the animal style is just a mix of their special sauce that they put on it. I think it's fried onions, Thousand Island, and a couple of other things. And so I really just try to slam as many calories as possible, especially after a big race. I'm not a huge person who worries as much about diet. I'm kind of the Michael Phelps method, if you will, especially when he was training to get those 8 gold medals, he was eating like 10,000 calories a day. Really, at that point, it's just what's going in is going out. And so I just need to eat as much as possible to kind of maintain energy production.
Mm. Yeah, and sometimes it can be challenging to get so many calories in. Next question. Do you prefer climbs, descents, rollers, or flats?
I'm a descent guy all the way. My trike is probably twice as heavy as everybody else's bike. And as every person I think that I've listened to on this show, yourself included, I'm at least 50 to 75 pounds heavier than most of you guys. And so anytime it comes to going downhill, that becomes my favorite thing because my effort usually ceases and I just get to enjoy steering and trying to catch up because I usually got dropped on the hills.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, I mean, are you pretty comfortable when it comes to like technical descents? I mean, to be able to bomb down them? Because I mean, just with being on the recumbent trike, I'm sure you could pick up quite a bit of speed with the aerodynamics. Of course, then with your added weight, I mean, you're really flying down there.
Yeah, I try to train. Well, that's my favorite part of any training ride. If I can find one big hill to just fly down, obviously you want to make that as long as possible, just for the enjoyment and just kind of the thrill. It's like being a kid again. So I would say so. As long as I got my front disc brakes dialed in, they slow me down enough. And I mean, I've definitely had some close calls, and I've got some interesting videos from the 508 where I was really pushing that thing to the limit. Some windy roads, riding on both sides of the road. And you almost have to drift that back wheel because obviously it's not steering itself. And so I'm almost leaning like I'm riding a motorcycle in some cases, and trying to scoot that back wheel around to get it to go where I want it to go. But at the end of the day, breaking 50 miles an hour, which I did at NCOM a couple of times, it was a little bit terrifying, but it was also a much needed break from the amount of climbing that we had to do. So
Yeah, geez, I can imagine. Talking about motorcycle racing and another recumbent rider, not a trike, but the two-wheeler, Jason Perez. He was in one of our first few episodes. He was a professional motorcycle racer before, so he really bombs down the descents, easily exceeds 60, 65 miles per hour. Now, on that subject, do you know what your maximum speed that you hit was?
at NCOM, I was just over 50, I want to say. And so I don't know, I think probably 51, 52. Usually I'm pretty consistently to hit over 40 depending on how big the descent is. But that's pretty standard. I try to push it as much as possible again, because that's my favorite part. But other than that, I look forward to a good downhill.
Yeah, that's cool. It is a lot of fun. Got to be comfortable going down. Now, when it comes to seasons of the year, when do you enjoy riding the most? During the fall, the winter, the spring, or the summertime?
Spring and summer are kind of my bread and butter. I'm born and raised in Las Vegas, so I've acclimatized with what we call the thin desert blood. So the hotter it is, I'm not scared to go out and ride. I honestly hate riding in the cold. You can always put on a bunch of clothes and stuff, but at the end of the day, the ride I just did on Sunday, started out in the 40s, which definitely isn't that bad, but I bundled up just because I'm pushing a lot of wind on the trike. And then I ended up with it warmed up really quick. And so about halfway through, I had to basically stop and strip all my cold gear off. And by the time I got home, it was 65. So probably could have planned a little better for that. I mean, I've done some rides in 20-degree weather. That's pretty miserable. Regardless of how much clothes you have on, it's never enough. So,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Some of the challenges of ultra cycling, especially when you're riding through the whole day or multiple days. What time of day do you prefer training? Morning, afternoon, evening?
I'm a morning, afternoon for sure. I usually drop my kids off from school, and then as soon as I do that, I'm either straight to the gym for weights, body weight, whatever I'm doing via my coach, or I'm straight to riding, and that'll be anywhere generally during the week between 1 to 3 hours. Some days if I was going long, especially like when I did my 200 milers indoors, I treated it just like, I was doing the race. So I started usually about 5:30 a.m. Or 6, and I rode basically 12 hours nonstop until the evening. If I'm doing a 100 miler, especially for time, I can usually get that right around the 5 hour mark or a little below. Like 4:45 is my best. So I can do that in the morning and then get to the office.
Nice. Wow, that's great. Now, you did mention some power training, strength training. See here.
Yeah, so what's cool, my wife does CrossFit every day actually. Come from I would say my kids better be athletes, let's put it that way. My wife actually skates for the Golden Knights ice crew, so that's our hockey team out here. She skated unbeknownst to me before I met her from age 2 to 14. And so let's say our first date, which was ice skating, again, I had no idea that she had done that. Basically semi-professionally, it seemed like, when she showed up, and I had broken hockey skates that I had rented, and she had her custom, $2,000 boots, blah, blah, blah. And she also does CrossFit basically 5 or 6 days a week. So every Saturday I go to CrossFit with her. And that may increase depending on training. But I've been focusing a lot on just body weight stuff, or just things that kind of trying to isolate, core mobility, strength in areas that I may have some weaknesses in. And that way I don't end up injuring myself in this training process, because again, my personality is, I'm going to go and I'm going to try to do, be professional at whatever I do. And that's obviously probably not always the wisest or realistic, as we learned at the Silver State 508. So
Yeah. It takes some getting used to experience, but it's great that you have all of those skills, mindset, physical ability, and commitment to be successful. Now, you mentioned your wife and your family. Here's 2 great photos. Here's one.
Yeah, that was actually my last day in command. I swapped over. My wife actually had moved back to Las Vegas, so I was in Georgia. We were there for a while as a family, and I was going through the medical discharge process. And so my wife and 2 girls moved back, and what I was told was going to be quick. Ironically, obviously, I should have known better, because nothing in the government is fast. So 3 months turned into 9 months. So they came back for my change of command, and I was in command for about 14 months there at basic training. And so that was probably one of the last days that I had shaved. And obviously I haven't shaved since. So my family came down, and, we enjoyed that time. And now I try to, as much as possible, make riding a family affair. My 2 daughters, my youngest rides a balance bike, and my oldest just transitioned about or right around Christmas to a bike with pedals, and she had been riding her balance bike for about a year, and that took probably about 10 minutes for her to figure that out, and she was off to the races. We were around the neighborhood. That same day we rode to the park, which was 1.5 miles away, with hills up and down, and she is loving it. So it's nice for me to kind of bond with her in that way. And you'll see another picture in there, probably one of the longer ones, or near the bottom. All the kids in the 3 neighbors that we have, they're all out riding yesterday. And I actually created a little race course for them, as little as, right there. So all 6 of them were out there, helmets on. I'm always a big helmet fan. My old coach, who was wearing a helmet, and it probably saved her life, she fell and got a massive concussion, and it's taken her over a year to get through that. But all of them, even that littlest one on the balance bike, I pulled my youngest is in the Burley behind me, and then my oldest right there on her orange bike, and my wife has a recumbent as well, not nearly the race machine that mine is. She had a back surgery while I was active duty, and that's my youngest right there. So we try to ride a couple times a week, especially to the park. And my oldest actually wants to show off and ride her bike to school to show all her friends, because I pull them to school in the Burley quite often, especially as the weather gets nicer. So, and that is all of us. And my service dog, Striker, there on the right. He's a golden doodle.
That's so cool. Yeah, a lot of great photos, Caleb, and good adventures. It's cool that you're able to do it with not just only your kids, but also the kids in your neighborhood. I'm sure they'll all grow up with a lot of crazy ideas, just like you. and
I
perhaps
hope
one day
so.
be
I
interviewing
try.
them on the show. Yeah, I bet your both your daughters are going to be amazing athletes, just like yourself and your wife, and that's a really great way for you to be able to influence them. So well done. Now, kind of getting back to some of our questions here, just wondering, Caleb, do you think now in your, I guess, short amount of time as an ultra cyclist, you've learned a lot? When it comes to the physical and mental training, what do you think? Does ultra cycling require more physical or mental training and strength?
I think it's a balance of both. So you absolutely, if you don't have the physical, I don't think any amount of mental is going to get you there. So obviously you can't have one without the other. However, I would say my coach says I'd rather have you undertrained. And obviously with grit, I think you can get through that. So I'd rather have you, 20% overtrained, or excuse me, 20% undertrained than 2% overtrained, because you can show up overtrained to any event and, now you're got an injury, or, you end up bonking out at the end just because there's no energy left or something along those lines. So obviously, yourself being an ultra cyclist, and I would say in any physical event, I don't know if it's a perfect 50-50 balance. I think it's dependent on the situation, depending on the rider. Some people could maybe do more with less, and they might be very physically, capable and mentally weak, or vice versa. But at the end of the day, when you're tired, hungry, and potentially cold and wet, that's when I think the mental comes in, and that's probably going to get you through the more worse of times than, hey, I'm very physically capable.
Mm. Yeah, well said, Caleb. It's very true. We can go a long way with our mental experience and also strength. But I like what you said about your coach, about coming to a race a little bit undertrained rather than overtrained. And I think that is important. And it's a difficult thing to try to balance unless we have a good coach or mentor or somebody to kind of lead us and guide us, and perhaps metrics to track and, things to keep in mind. So thanks for sharing that with all of us. Now, in the few ultra cycling events that you have done, which has been your favorite one so far?
Silver State 508 by far. Rob Panzera puts on an outstanding event. And so I highly recommend that. I am hoping that I'm able to do that again here in 2021. I really enjoyed, well, one, I think the route is just second to none. Being a Las Vegas native, I rode through places in Nevada that I didn't even know existed. A majority of it's on what they call the loneliest road in America, and it is absolutely correct. We did some massive climbs that I cannot really replicate here without really kind of traveling outside of the Las Vegas proper area. And so, we climbed Geiger Grade, and before that, I think my biggest climb that I had done was maybe a mile and a half or 2 miles. And that climb seemed like it went on forever. But then again, the nice thing about that was when I got to go downhill, I made up a lot of ground. So I got to see a lot of kind of old Nevada. And when I think of kind of these Wild West type scenarios, that's very much what a lot of the rural Nevada is. And so I got to see places that I'd never seen, and I've lived here, my whole life. So the timing was excellent, the communication, there was no surprises, and he is by far, he's on my crew right now, at potentially one of my two crew chiefs for Race Across the West Coast. I talk with him, Matt Hoffman, and the owner, Rich Staley from Great Basin Bicycles out there, who really, all three of them really kind of embody what ultra cycling is. And so I'm very impressed with that event.
Yeah, really good to have an excellent crew. But it sounds like a fun event that you did. And it's so true that in ultra cycling, one of the things that we all love, and I know especially, is the opportunity to be able to explore and go on adventures, and even in our own backyards. And quite frankly, if it wasn't for cycling and ultra cycling, a lot of the area where I live here in the San Francisco Bay Area, I would never have gone through. And even in a car, it's a totally different experience, and we all know that. And so I'm glad you're able to share in those experiences as well. Now, I saw a couple of photos here. I was wondering which events they are for. There's this photo here, first of all.
That's 508.
That's what I thought.
Obviously, when I show up places, no one shows up on a trike, and when they do, they're very much, I would say, not expected to do well. So
Mm.
before I had my major mechanical failure, I was top 10, which I wasn't expecting by any means. But I showed up, and after 100 miles, people wanted to race. And so I was ready to race. And maybe that was a bit of a rookie mistake. I don't really know. I don't think it caused my mechanical failure by any means. But I found that I fit in very well with the group of people that was there. And I was a pleasant surprise. Again, I had trained for 6 months, and to that point, 6 weeks. And to that point, I hadn't ridden more than 145 miles cumulative, just from time availability and things of that nature. So when I showed up, I was really just rolling the dice, and was relying a lot on the mental, which never quit. My bike just decided at some point it did not want to roll. And we were at about 305 miles or something like that when that happened. So,
Wow, yeah. So you were a long ways into it. And well, I guess maybe your bike was trying to tell you that you need to ease him into it. And that's one rude awakening for a bicycle
yeah,
to
if you go back to the photos, there's one that looks like something's kind of hanging down by the rear wheel. That was my chain. So
uh,
go
this
up
one.
one more, go left one more, right up above there on the right. So at
Okay.
this point, yeah, you see my chain there. I basically put so much torque into that rear derailleur that I bent it backwards. I did a hard shift, which I learned very quickly from my mechanic back at the shop. You need to soft pedal into those shifts while you're climbing. And so that was naivete on my part. I had ridden not extensively, but I had never not kind of ridden that way. I just shifted when I needed to shift. And so you can obviously see my rear derailleur is jacked. I also twisted the chain. And so you see that link there closest to the rear, the cassette. It was destroyed. And so that was at 175 miles at that point. I think I was in ninth or 10th, and well on pace. Granted, there was no recumbent records again. So I mean, I was gonna set a record that like a regular cyclist would have been proud of, and not just a recumbent cyclist at that point. And so at that point, I called Rob Panzera and I just said, I don't know what to do. I had no real mechanic with me. I didn't have the materials to fix it, and I just said, can we basically mark where I'm at on the map, drive back to Reno to the bike shop, get new chains, and come back? And he said, hang on. The bike shop owner, Rich, was actually on the course doing a relay with his team, and they came back through that checkpoint, and basically NASCAR fixed my trike and had me rolling. It took them probably 5 or 10 minutes. He rebent my derailleur the other way, relined everything up as best he could. Somehow there was an issue with the limiter screw, so I probably overshifted, and basically got the chain off the cassette or something along those lines, and did a lot of damage to the trike. They fixed it as best they could, and at that point, once everything got rolling, that following morning, I did another 120, 130-ish miles, give or take, before basically the bike seized up and refused to roll. So,
Yeah, what an experience. And it's cool to see the help that you got, a very heroic attempt. And of course, you were able to continue going for some time. And it's cool that you didn't just stop and call it quits. And you were talking about, having grit. I think that is a part of it, being able to keep going and roll with the punches, so to speak. So well done on that. Now, when you think of ultra cycling, Caleb, who pops into your mind?
So obviously, your podcast has opened my eyes to many people that I didn't know. But I would say from my small circle of people that most people probably don't know, Matt Hoffman, my coach, single attempt solo ram finisher, 2015. Very impressed by him and what he's done. He came from a racing background, and did a lot of short work. He actually runs a nonprofit called Velo Youth in the San Diego area. And so they actually have an outdoor velodrome, and it's right near the San Diego Zoo. And so I actually met him there when I was down there with my family. And it's really cool to see what he's doing in trying to get kind of the at-risk youth to get out there, ride, get on the bike, and realize that there's, maybe a different path for them. Again, I mentioned he took the only hand cyclist across America, and I cannot imagine. I mean, obviously legs are built to, I think, feel like be destroyed. I cannot imagine somebody's upper body strength to hand cycle some of these climbs that I look forward to enduring. So Andre in 2017 went coast to coast, and from my understanding is still the only hand cyclist. And from the way Matt puts it, basically used this event as just kind of a stepping stone, a feather in his cap as he's gone to do more and more amazing things. And so one day I hope to look forward to actually meeting him. Mark Whitehouse, who's about to go set the recumbent record. Before I met him, I thought I was a unicorn, and there was nobody else like me out here that existed doing what I did. And I was glad to link up with him, and get to know that I'm not alone in this process. So I mean, those are the kind of the unknown people, I would say, the unsung heroes of the ultra cycling community. Obviously, Christoph Strasser is a legend. And for all intensive purposes, I think at some point all of us looked up to Lance Armstrong, even though they're a little bit of a different type of ultra cycling. I think that he paved the way for a lot of people in making things popular, regardless of his ethical choices. And so, I think his work ethic and things along those lines is something we can learn from.
Yeah, most definitely. Well said. And of course, you've mentioned Andre on several occasions. Here he is. I remember following him also, Ram 2017. Just amazing to be able to do that. With your legs, it's difficult enough. The cycling, horse.
And obviously, this is endurance, so he's not massively bulky on the top, but at the same time, I guarantee that bike probably weighs, almost as much as mine, if not more. And between my coach and I like to call Matt. I spend a lot of time while I'm racing calling people. It kind of takes my mind off of things. And again, I'm almost hands free, or at least I can do things with one hand because I'm on a trike that balances itself. So the nice thing is, I can just park on my iPhone, and I have my AirPods in, usually just one. So obviously I can hear what's going on in the other ear around me, and just give it commands. Hey, call this person, call this person. So I'll call Matt and we'll talk about his experiences or whatever I'm feeling at the moment. And he's like, I'll talk about passing people on climbs. And he's like, yeah, when Andre would pass people, we would say over their internal comms that, yeah, man, you just got gimped. And so that's kind of become a thing that I'd like to bring back. And I'm hoping in Zwift that they actually put a recumbent trike option and a hand cycle option on there. Because obviously right now I'm riding with just a regular roadie, but I would love to hear people's reactions or read them on the screen when I zoom by them on a three-wheeled bicycle and they're suffering up a hill or something like that. So,
yeah, totally. It's cool that you're able to have fun with that and make the best of the situation. Of course, you do have a disability. I wanted to get into that. You sent some of these interesting x-rays here, two in particular. You can take a look at this first one.
Yeah, so that's my spine. Obviously not how it should look, at least normally. So interestingly enough, and I didn't know this, I rode a TT bike for a long time, and just tried to drive through the pain. because in the infantry, especially if you go to a doctor, you are very much seen, you're not necessarily killing your career depending on what the issue is. But at that point, when I raised the red flag, it was a quality of life issue. I could barely sleep at night. I couldn't bathe my daughters. I could barely move in for all intents and purposes. And so I absolutely could not do my job. And once we finally got that imagery, they were like, oh, yeah, this makes a lot of sense why you're in so much pain. So I've got multiple curves in my spine. Obviously, my hips are way off. So my left leg is shorter than my right leg by about 3/4 of an inch. And so I actually have spacers underneath my left cleat. And so trying to figure out that balance piece of how do we have shorter muscle groups on one side balance with the longer muscle groups on the other side, and skeletal issues and stuff like that. So I attempted thinking, if I get rid of the TT option, okay, I can't bend in half anymore, understood. Maybe I just go to a regular road bike. And so if you go to the picture with the big flag in the honor ride, this was Veterans Day 2019 or 2018, excuse me. So I'd been fresh out of the Army a couple months. And so I went to my shop and explained, what I wanted to do. And I rented a bike trying to figure out, I had sold my TT bike at that point and honestly kind of given up hopes and dreams of ever riding again. And so I rode, it was only 40 miles, which, is kind of a joke now for the ultra cyclists. But at that time, that was a long way when I hadn't ridden in over a year. And so I was like, well, if I rent this bike, it was an Argon, beautiful bike, my body would not take it. And so the last half of the ride, literally the last 20 miles, was basically all downhill. And if it was not, I would not have finished, just because I physically could not pedal anymore. And so ironically, the guy who finished next to me was on a recumbent. And he explained to me what I needed to do to get one through the VA. And the guy who runs the recreational therapy program happened to be there at the event, because there was probably 30 or 40, there was a mix of hand cyclists, recumbent cyclists, et cetera, at the event. And they wanted to make sure that they were able to get out there and, without having any issues. They transported a lot of the bikes in from the VA. And so once I got set up with them, I then was able to actually ride without pain. And Wounded Warrior Project also helped out with that. I did a soldier ride in San Diego, November of 18, and they reintroduced me to basically cycling and the ability to do so again pain-free. And then I continued to work through the recreational therapy program. And in doing that, I got my trike July the 6th. I'll never forget that day. It was almost like a kid getting their car for the first time. I felt a sense of freedom again. Like, hey, I'm going to be able to do this. And obviously I rode that thing almost every day since I got that in July. Went right into 508 thinking I was going to go across the country, and again quickly learned I didn't know what I didn't know. But that's kind of been my initial journey. I've had some great times on TT bikes. I rode with Brett Favre at Bow Bikes Bama. I raced through a half Ironman, and my goal was eventually to go to Ironman World Championships and actually be on the Army Olympic team through the World Class Athlete Program out in Colorado Springs, where they take Olympic hopefuls and you basically become a recruiting tool for the Army, but you're also able to compete in your sport and continue to get paid while on active duty. And so that was my eventual goal until my back decided otherwise. So now we're kind of looking at the Paralympics. Right now, there's not a recumbent option, but Stephen Peace, who is a Navy veteran, a Naval Academy graduate, and I won't hold it against him as he is my cycling brother, but go Army, beat Navy always. So he's a disabled veteran himself, but he competes on an upright trike. So basically 2 wheels in the back, 1 in the front on a BMC. And he's completed, very highly at the national level, Paralympics, all kinds of, things that fit within the UCI categories. And so I'm hoping with his help and help of other disabled veterans to allow us recumbent folks to get into the mix. As my Olympic dreams have not died, they've just shifted. So.
Yeah. Well, great story. Thanks for sharing that with us. I think it just reiterates the importance and the potential with mental grit when you have physical challenges that you have to deal with, that there are other ways to be able to accomplish your goals and dreams as an ultra cyclist and quite frankly, just as a human being. And it's cool to hear your story. And I'm sure it's very inspiring for your family, for your kids to see, just as you keep pushing the boundaries for what's possible and you never give up. And then, of course, I hope that everyone watching can find some inspiration from your story. I know that for me, it definitely challenges me to see what is possible with my own life and, my own challenges that I may face, whether it's just on a mental aspect or even physically. And of course, a lot of great photos here. Here's a nice one.
Yeah, that was my last company that I pushed through. So obviously, at that point we were civilians to soldiers in 14 weeks, and turning these young men into infantrymen. There's nothing like it. I will cherish these moments probably for the rest of my life. I have some big plaques in my office of, my company guide on, which is our flag, and my drill sergeants. I hold them near and dear to my heart. And I still talk to several of them and different people that I worked with to this day. And I've been out of the Army, about a year and a half or so now. And I still keep in close contact with a lot of those people. It was a really cool experience to see somebody, they come in with the desire to be, what you are. And then you're able to kind of strip away the individual mindset and turn them into a team player and a lethal weapon, basically, and then unleash them out on the Army. And, as soon as they left me, they could have ended up, deploying and going to fight our nation's wars. And so ensuring that they were ready for that it was a lot of pressure, but at the same time, it was a really cool honor and opportunity to create men in a society, in my opinion, that seems a little soft and a little too politically correct.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your service, of course, to the country and fighting for freedom. And it's very important. And of course, I'm glad that you are able to do something that you love and also continue to use it as a platform to inspire others, to also challenge and grow yourself. It's very cool. And I love your story. Glad to be able to share it with others and also hear about it myself. So what would you say if you were to sum it up in a few words? What motivates and drives you now as a disabled veteran, as an ultra cyclist, and of course you have a lot down the path that you would like to accomplish, still a lot in your bucket list. Well, what is keeping you motivated?
I think a couple things. Things that I never understood while I was active. So, people PT or that we physically train, 5 days a week at a minimum in the military. I think as much as that is for lethality and, being prepared to fight and win our nation's wars, it's also for mental health. And so I have a lot of mental health issues. My service dog, you've scrolled by him a couple of times, depression, suicidal ideations, anxiety, etc. Riding my bike, things are, I can control that. I can control my cadence. I can control my effort. So that's my service dog, Striker. He was very young and he is on his namesake, a Striker. And I bring that up because I tell people that a Striker broke me, the vehicle, and some of the issues that I think were caused with my back. I was in an accident that, grit tells us to drive through and fight through the mission. And I appreciate that. But at the same time, we got to have a balance. And so the Striker broke me. And so Striker, my dog, will help fix me and kind of keep me grounded. He's actually right here. Yep. That's him with his goggles and his earmuffs and his harness. So if I go out and shoot guns, I bring him along and he is fully protected just like us humans are. So I try to incorporate him in everything I do. He's actually my brand on my logo for my shirt that you've seen throughout this process, and a great talking point just to kind of normalize issues that people face, veterans especially. I don't want there to be a stigma about talking about issues that people face on a daily basis, and especially in a world that it's not popular to have problems, or it's hard to admit weakness. People need different help with different things. I'm happy to be people's poster boy, if you will. I've got issues, and for me to come out and say that, it really was kind of a weight off of my chest to just be honest and take a mask off of, I've always got to be this big badass soldier, and ready to never have issues and never have problems. And that's very much the understanding of being an officer in the Army, especially in the infantry. You are not, basically, it's almost an unspoken rule. You are not allowed to have problems. At least that is the stigma that is driven. And so if you come up and say that I do have issues, everyone's kind of basically afraid that they don't want to lose their career over it. And so, not that that's what caused me to get where I ended up. But I think if I would have sought help, especially physically, before I got to the point where I was, I might still be able to be, active, and it is what it is. And this is kind of my new platform to share, what is my daily desire. I want to prove that I can still do the things that I wanted to do, just in a different capacity. That one of the pictures in there, my catchphrase is I am uniquely abled instead of disabled. I don't take that. Yes, I am a disabled veteran, but I refuse to get disabled veterans license plates. I don't want people to see me and think any differently of me. So Rusty Dogs of War has become our moniker so at Silver State 508, when you sign up, you have to basically come up with a totem, is what they call it. And it has to be animal based. So my service dog is a rust color. War is just kind of, obviously I'm a war fighter by nature. My crew chief, he's a one-armed, one-legged Navy veteran. That's his vehicle, and we had those magnetic signs made. That's Stryker and me at the gun range with my AR-15 behind him and him in the window. But if you go see, and this is kind of what keeps me motivated. My crew chief's got less limbs than me and no excuses. And if you scroll down, you'll see him. That was at the finish line of the 508 with my infantry flag that goes with me to every finish line, regardless of whether I finish or not. But Shane Walsh has been a big inspiration for me, knowing, so that's my blue trike. That's the one that I got, via Wounded Warrior Project. And you can see his left side, and this was via motorcycle accident after he left the Navy. But when we were in Texas, we were out there dialing in. Obviously, we learned don't just show up with one trike, because if I would have had a second trike, even though that thing's not meant to race, I could have potentially finished the 508 on that trike, at least until I was able to get the yellow one fixed. So, don't show up with one. That's not one that I ride to practice, compete, etc., but I'd rather have and not need. So getting him out there on that, it just reiterated and showed me like, hey, if I can do this with all my limbs, and he's doing this without, I think that we can get through this. And so that's my team. That's his wife on my left there. And this is at the start of the 508. And so, it's really just kind of our hope and desire as we continue to go throughout the country, just to kind of create an idea and understanding that no matter what you're suffering through, your circumstances, etc., that doesn't have to be the end of your story. And for mine, and I've chosen to make that really just kind of the beginning. What can I do in my current state? We'll find out. I don't want to put a limit on myself, because I think at the end of the day, you are your biggest advocate, but you're also your own limiting factor. If you decide you can't do something, then you can't. And if you decide that you can, then you will find a way to do it. And so that's really, it's taken me a while to understand that. I would say probably the first year or so, me getting out was really just trying to get over, like, hey, I get a lot of attention because I walk around with a service dog. He's extremely cute. So, people they're petting him. They want to get all up in his face. And it used to bother me. And eventually I just realized he brings people as much joy as he helps me. I'm not going to stop that. But I also want to be out there to help other people when, they're going through a tough time. And it doesn't have to be identical to mine, but just to realize, for me, again, if I look at somebody, and I think this is common in people who, they see somebody who maybe has it worse off than them, and they think, oh, if that person can do it, then I can do it. And so that's just kind of been a lot of my philosophy. I check in with my crew chief almost daily. And, again, I see people like Andre, who he's got no excuse. He's got no legs. And he was like, all right, well, I'm just going to hand cycle my way across the country. If he can do it, I can do it. And so just opening up people's mind, being your biggest fan. And that's really, and I struggle with it every day. I'm not perfect at it by any means. And I don't want people to think that I've got it figured out, because I don't. But I also know that I can control my cadence, I can control my wattage, and I can control how long I'm riding. And other than that, I just try to kind of leave everything where it is. And so that's really, cycling has done that for me. It's kind of given me a semblance of control back over my life, where maybe I thought that I had lost it, and, to kind of bring it full circle. So.
Yeah, well said. Well, you're definitely the definition of a role model, and I'm sure you've inspired many lives already, including, of course, your own 2 daughters, your family, those around you, and of course, now all of us. So we really appreciate you sharing your story. It reminds me of a motto that I've always lived by, and also that I ride by, and it simply is, don't let the things you can't do keep you from doing what you can do. And I think your story, Andre's, of course, many others, it's exactly that it is possible to do things which otherwise, people may take for granted and think it's just impossible. And being able to see somebody like you doing what you're doing, having already achieved incredible things, including participation in the virtual World Time Trial Championships, and just having that grit to keep pushing on in spite of your physical challenges and overcoming them. I think it's a great story. And for me, in the show, what I love most about meeting guests like you and all the other guests, it's not just the achievements and the races that are participated in and, all those accolades, but really it's the story behind it. And I think that's what makes the ultra cycling family so unique, that there is so many stories just like yours, and that altogether we're able to show what is possible, humanly, physically, mentally. And so I must say, well done, congratulations. And of course, we do look forward to following your journey, because it's just at the very beginning. There's still so much more to come. But in all these photos that we've seen, there's so many great stories and successes. And I did want to make sure we covered each photo. I know we've covered quite a lot of them already, but there was also this one. Was this from the 508? I see another rider here. I think
that is the 508. You see me enjoying a nice downhill at that moment. I don't remember who I was riding with at that time. It looks like it could be a guy by the name of Pink Flamingo, but I'm not for certain. But he actually rides for a veteran organization, and he broke the over 70 record at the 508. And he's, training and competing like, he's a 30-year-old man. It's very impressive to see, especially at the 508. I think the median age was 55. So when I show up at 28 years old and I'm on the recumbent trike, people are like, who is this guy? He clearly doesn't know what he's doing. And they were 1,000% correct. But to see that, this sport lasts, well into the latter years of your life, it's very motivating for me when I see that. So.
Yeah, that's right. We didn't even discuss it. So when you were doing the 508, you were 28. How old are you now, Caleb?
I'm still 28, so I'll be turning 29 here in July. Again, basically every race that I've done has been within kind of the last 6-7 months. So my goal originally was to qualify for Race Across America and toe the line this summer. Again, I learned that I don't know what I don't know, and I think I was putting a little too much pressure on myself, and I didn't have enough training time on the trike specifically. And so that being said, we discussed it with my crew, and obviously I still haven't qualified. So we said, hey, maybe raw race across the West is just a better idea because you still haven't done anything where you've even gone remotely close to 1,000 miles. And as we were discussing before, this even got started, people don't know what race across America or race across the West Coast is, especially here in the States. So if you do one or the other, they're going to be impressed. It doesn't really matter. At the end of the day, this is not the big money sport, and I'm not in this for that. And a lot of people ask me, why do you ride? Are you getting paid when you finish and win races? And like, no, I ride for myself, and I ride to show others what they're capable of. And so at the end of the day, I think that raw will be a great eye opener for me. Again, learning process. Every race has been a learning process of what works and what doesn't work. And so as we could then continue on, then I'll have another year to really kind of dial things in. And, if I need to maybe make some bike changes or things along those lines, I don't want to rush the process, because when I go toe to line, I want to finish. I feel like I'm doing this for a lot more than myself. And so, I don't want to not necessarily let people down, but not have a good showing and a good performance. Because I'm not just racing for myself to get a record. I'm racing to show other people what they're capable of. And so I think that would be a waste to rush that process.
Yeah, I think that's a great attribute of an ultra cyclist as well. Just, patience. It's almost like pacing yourself out. And it is very easy to get super excited and get into it. But like you said, being able to finish that and have a result that you're proud of, I think is another thing. And, it is a whole journey. And even as you mentioned, you're not doing it for, any of these other reasons that, a traditional road racer may be, competing. And it's really more about the journey and the growth, and also the stories that you're able to share to inspire others. But I think all that you've already done, especially at 28 years of age, is very impressive. And like you mentioned, the average ultra cyclist is much older. And so that means that there's a long road still ahead for you to be able to make your mark in ultra cycling, and also continue to tell your amazing adventures and stories. So I'm looking forward to following that and cheering you on at the Race Across the West, also Race Across America. I know it'll happen in due timing, and it'll be cool to see. I'm sure even your kids and your wife will be there to cheer you on, or perhaps even support you. And it's great that you have the family that is also active and very supportive. It makes a big difference, I'm sure. Here's another great photo, you and your daughters.
Yeah, that was before I left for Silver State 508. So we all have Rusty Dogs of War shirts, and I got them small ones. And so that's, I very much want to include them when appropriate and when possible. And so, as of right now, I probably won't have them on the crew as of yet. And I know my coach, Matt Hoffman, says that especially on something like Race Across America it's going to be an ugly process. You're going to reach mental points, physical points where you probably don't want your family to necessarily see that side. And so right now he's very much against having family on the crew. And I respect that. I'd rather they get to see me at the start with a smile on my face, and at the finish with a smile on my face. And throughout the journey on FaceTime, because I always make it a point to try and put them to bed while I'm out on the course. But as I learned at NCOM 375, you may not always have cell phone signal. So you try to do that as best you can and figure things out. But I try to make my family, very much a part of my process. I do a lot of training with them and pulling them. And if I can't maybe go a certain distance, maybe I truncate the distance, but do that, with added weight and hit the hills. And both of them plus the trailer is probably about a little over 100 pounds. I don't know if that is an exact, correlation to, drag coefficient, et cetera, of what that added, pressure of wattage. But I definitely notice a difference when I'm climbing a hill with them versus not. So, it's for me, it's they enjoy the bike, and they they're still not too cool to hang out with dad, and they want to participate in the activities. And what I always try to do is finish the ride by ending at a park so that they can play, and then we'll finish a couple miles and go home. So trying to keep them engaged and entertained. I have a portable Bluetooth speaker, and we listen to whatever music they want to. And so I've done some long rides listening to Trolls and Frozen and whatever else they request, just because I know if they're going to come along with it, they got to stay entertained. So.
Yeah, that's so fun though. And I'm sure that's doing so much good for them. And as they get older, their interests will definitely be aligned with the experiences that you've given them. So it's very exciting. Can't wait to also follow their journeys and see what starting lines they show up to one day. I'm sure they'll be just as crazy, if not crazier than you.
I hope so.
Here's another cool photo. You're talking about it earlier. Go Army, beat Navy.
Yeah. So like I said, I'm a West Point graduate. That's something that I hold near and dear to my heart. And I think that it very much shaped a lot of, my mindset. So that's our motto. That's been our motto since day one at basic training. And that will always be, every year, Army, Navy. December is for me, obviously Christmas, but Army, Navy is every December. And so I look forward to that rivalry, and will continue for many years. So.
Yeah, most definitely. Now, for those who aren't familiar, are you referring to the football game?
I am referring to the football game. And so obviously when you're a cadet, you are mandated to go. And I always enjoyed that. We were either in Philadelphia at Lincoln Financial Field, where the Eagles play, or we did one game, and they alternate usually between there and DC at the Redskins Stadium. This last year, they were actually at West Point because of COVID, and they only allowed cadets to be there. And the last time that they played at West Point, I want to say it was in the 50s or 60s. And it was very cool to watch that and then hold them to shut out the entire game. The saying goes that you can lose every regular season game and win Army Navy, and that would be a successful season. However, I'm enjoying having a winning season and winning Army Navy because during my time as a cadet at West Point, we lost a lot of games and we did not win Army Navy ever. So I look forward to seeing it in person, hopefully here soon if not this coming year, maybe the following year, because I'd like to bring my family along.
Yeah, that sounds really cool. That'd be awesome. Yeah, it was fun to have a little fun and friendly competition, even as an ultra cyclist. And I'm sure you've experienced some of that already, especially in the virtual World Time Trial Championships, racing with ultra cyclists from all around the world. And that's some of the fun of ultra cycling. Now, a lot of other great photos that we've already seen. Of course, here's one when you're at the NCOM 375. Here's one also when you were doing the virtual World Time Trial Championships. We didn't discuss this one, and there's one other last one I saw as well. Tell me a little bit about this photo. I see a bunch of different people we haven't seen yet, and wearing some interesting clothing here with some slogans and words on there.
So Forgotten Not Gone is actually a nonprofit that I am trying to help champion. You see the two co-founders there, husband and wife, Peter on the right and Kelly on the left. That's actually the mayor of Henderson. That's the little suburb of Las Vegas that I live in. So they basically both retired Air Force veterans, and they, just like myself, spent a lot of time trying to figure out what is successful, especially in how do I handle mental health, physical disabilities, etc. And originally, say 10 years ago, when people were getting out of the military, they had mental health issues or physical health issues. A lot of them were just given a lot of opioids and potentially even booked in, permanent kind of inpatient healthcare facilities. And they were they were part of that problem, if you will. And we weren't successful at integrating veterans back into society. And so they started a nonprofit in dealing with that. And their nonprofit is pushing trikes. And so they, people meet up, we ride as a group. We've ridden with, our senator. I rode with the senator from here in Nevada in my district. Um, and they are very well connected politically. But at the same time, they want people to know that, especially veterans, you may feel forgotten, but you are not gone. And so that I met them 5 days after I left active duty, and I will never forget that. I was in a very, very bad spot mentally. I was just kind of felt like I was drowning, didn't know, what I could do. I was at that point, I hadn't even done the soldier ride, and I was very excited to at least attempt to be physically active in something that didn't cause more pain than I was already in. And I was also just excited to see veterans in my community that were out being successful and helping champion and be honest about the different struggles and problems that we all face. And so they are, people that I will always, make sure that I bring up. And I have their logo on the opposite side of my Captain America shield to ensure that that's somebody that is always going to get some face time and some screen time when inevitably everyone generally wants to take a picture of my trike because it looks different than everybody else's. And, I try to make it as race ready as possible. Especially coming from a triathlon background. I know that every, little carbon thing and every aerodynamic advantage helps. And so I want that to be something that I can help move the ball in the right direction and drive awareness to them.
Yeah, that's really great what you're doing. And of course, we could see on the disc here, top right of it, the logo, forgotten, but not gone.
Yep, they're there. My bike shop, Pro Cyclery, they've done great support. Wounded Warrior Project has helped me. Even my home office, as I explained to them what I was doing, American National, as I'm an insurance agent for them. And we're all independent. So, I don't clock in or clock out. But I explained to basically the head of marketing what I plan on doing. And they very much rallied behind me and cut me a check and said, we absolutely are going to support this process. And so it's very nice to have people understanding the vision of what we're doing, but also realize at the end of the day, we're all human and we're trying to, just continue to bring awareness and kindness across the board. So.
Yeah, it's great that you're using cycling as a platform for good, as many do. And it is amazing what you are able to accomplish. As you just simply tell your story and live out some of your passion as an athlete, as a cyclist. And of course, you're sharing that with your own family. And that's been great for them. You can all do that together. Of course, we showed those photos earlier where you were, also helping the neighborhood kids as well. So a really big deal. So you're really touching many lives on a variety of levels. And it's a great story. Now, one final photo we have here. Tell me about this one.
So this was Bo Bikes Bama, and Bo Jackson actually does a cool event. Again, I lived in Georgia for about 3 years. This is my old training partner, Greg Kukubrick, who's also an ultra cyclist and Ironman athlete. So I'm going to do the ride across Georgia with him here Memorial Day weekend, and our goal is to actually break his old team's relay record. It's 277 miles, and our goal is under 12 and a half hours. But at that event, we met Brett Favre, who rides there a lot. Sometimes Lance even shows up, and then Bo Jackson also rides that event, and he is raising money to help the Alabama Emergency Relief Foundation. Again, it's nice to be able to just kind of support other people through cycling. And there was a lot of people that showed up for that event. And it's on the Auburn campus. So it's cool to see that kind of really no matter wherever you're at in whatever state you're in, there's always something that usually cyclists want to help be a part of and make a positive change.
Yep. We're definitely on the same wavelength. Of course, Christoph Strasser had interviewed me episode 50, and I've shared some of my story in supporting, in that story, one nonprofit, but through my career as an ultra cyclist, many nonprofits. And I think that's one of the reasons I love cycling as well, not only improving myself, but also improving my local communities and, quite frankly, the world. And so well done. And I really congratulate you on all that you're doing, Caleb. Very exciting. Now, ultra cycling requires certain attributes that, often may be overlooked or not even realized. So I'm curious to know from you, now that you're an ultra cyclist, have participated in a variety of events, have gotten a bunch of experience. What do you think most people don't realize about the sport of ultra cycling, whether it's a non-cyclist or just a non-ultra cyclist?
I think people, we go back to people handicapping themselves. I've watched people quit on races, weather's bad, things along those lines. You, you really don't know, I think, what you're capable of until you get to that point where you're at that breaking point. And for me, it was the mechanical failure. And what was my choice? Was I going to throw in the towel and say I'm done and get in the vehicle at 175 miles? Oh, by the way, it was raining outside, thunderstorms, etc. And I watched people came from France to race the 508 and quit because the weather was bad, saying, "We're not heroes. We're not here to do this. We quit." And they threw their timer chip at the people at the checkpoint and got in their vehicle and left. And I was honestly, I was shocked. Obviously, the amount of money and time that it takes to train for something like this, and the commitment to fly from another country and then to just kind of throw in the towel. You really don't know what you're made of, until the rubber meets the road. And so for me, this is a great path for me to remind myself, like, yeah, I'm not physically able to, lead troops into combat and things along those lines, but that doesn't mean that my edge and my hardness is gone. I've just got to find a new outlet for it. And it's funny when people tell me, man, my legs hurt after riding 2 miles or whatever, and you rode 375 miles in 24 hours. Like, that's insane. I'm like, yeah, well, that's certified by the VA. That's fine. So I'm just going to embrace it. And it is what it is. But again, having people push themselves to new limits, and realizing that, things are achievable if they desire to do it, for me has been very rewarding. And to watch other people do that and to hear other people's stories, it's cool to be amongst a group of like-minded individuals when, again, I don't think the society necessarily, it doesn't reward this. It almost ostracizes and isolates people like us, not just cyclists, but anybody who's at a high level of anything, because it's easier for somebody to criticize behind a phone or a camera or what have you. And instead of going out and attempting to do things about it and realizing, man, this is really difficult. This requires a lot of discipline. There's a lot of training, science, et cetera, behind whatever your sport is, especially if you look at any of the greats, LeBron James, Tom Brady, Michael Jordan, Michael Phelps, Christoph Strasser. Like, the amount of effort and dedication it takes to be successful at an elite level is, so hard to find. And it's easier for people to armchair quarterback and criticize, or, you guys are crazy, I don't want to do this. Great, then don't do it. But you're absolutely capable of doing so, or at least being more capable than what you currently are doing. And so that's something that I think it's opened my eyes, as something that I thought would be a little bit easier. But I've gained a respect for what I'm doing, as I'm learning. I don't know what I don't know, and I will happily admit that I am very new to this, and I'm happy to listen. I'm going to start incorporating some liquid stuff just because you and Christoph seem to be doing well with it. And I'd like to try it and see maybe if that works better for me. So there's always new things to learn, and I'm looking forward to the journey.
Yeah, that's part of the fun of it. There's so much to learn, so many ways to strategize, different events, different challenges. And yeah, it never is boring when it comes to ultra cycling. When it comes to liquid hydration, of course, definitely try it out in training first. And there's many products out there. Just find the one that's palatable for you, that sits well for you. But for me, I've always kind of had a pretty good stomach. I know many cyclists, varying degrees of discomfort and issues when it comes to food and eating and hydration. But I think there's always a product out there for everyone. And on the show, I would say probably the majority, 60, 70% of ultra cyclists that we've interviewed on the show have used liquid hydration and nutrition in some form or another. Of course, when you get into the multi-day events, you may have to change it up and have some solids here and there and just figure out what works for you. But of course, it sounds like you've already done a lot of that and you have a lot of experience with some longer distances as well. But I think it just checks the box in a lot of ways. It's convenient, it's fast. You get a lot of packed in a small volume. So, on those kind of notes, when it comes to like tips and tricks, what are some tips and tricks that you have, maybe one or two, that you would want to share for others who would like to get started with ultra cycling?
I would say focus on what you can control. You don't have to go out and buy the most expensive bike, because I've seen plenty of people with expensive bikes fail. And that's where, things along those lines, as you continue to get involved in whatever sport it is, but especially in cycling, along with golf, I think people think the more money I spend, the faster I will be. And I think there's some truth to that. But I also think that you have to know how to use your equipment. And if you can't maximize what you have already, you can go out and ride, a regular bike for as long as you so desire. There's people that do the 508 on a fixed gear bike. That's their own category. Personally, I call those people crazy. I think that they have my utmost respect. I can't imagine climbing over 20,000 feet and doing 500 miles on a fixed gear bicycle. So, just really get out, try stuff, sign up for an event. And also, my personality, I don't do well with just kind of putting my toe in the water. I dive in head first. And that's something that my wife and my best friends have always kind of laughed about, is like, oh, what's he getting into now? And how much is it going to cost? But for me, looking back, I would say also find a good mentor, somebody who's done it before and can at least advise. Obviously you're going to try different things and figure things out. I know, not everybody has a coach. You did a lot of your own coaching. And for a short time, I did a lot of my own coaching as well, just to kind of see what I could do. But then I realized I probably surpassed my ability level, and I need to leave this up to somebody who's got more experience. And so, I think also knowing when to back off. This is something where pride and ego can easily get you hurt, especially in the more extreme challenges. And so having somebody, as my coach says, once you toe the line and cross the start line, you are now the big, dumb athlete. You just have to pedal your bike and you stop making decisions. You are not in charge, which is hard for me because that's not how I'm wired, especially being the infantry officer. I'm still trying to make decisions while I'm on the road and things along those lines. And I'm working on changing that. So, having somebody that I trust, experience-wise, et cetera, it's quite the process. Obviously, this takes a village to get somebody across the finish line. And in my opinion, I think it's going to be harder to be on a crew than it is to cycle. I'm very much looking forward to learning about the crew side when I go crew from my close friend who's about to set the 24-hour record in Borrego. And, seeing what that's like to be a crew chief and make sure that for him, he gets to have the best race possible for himself, and try to anticipate problems, things along those lines. It's going to be an interesting viewpoint to see it not behind the pedals. So.
Yeah, very true. So many aspects to ultra cycling, but thanks for giving those great tips and tricks and advice for those who are looking to get into ultra cycling. I think they're very important ones. Two final questions that I have, Caleb, for you as we conclude this great conversation that we've had, and I look forward to having you back for another sprint round for your upcoming events. But you were talking about knowing your equipment and knowing your gear. So just curious, how would you rate yourself in terms of bicycle maintenance on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being exceptional?
I'd be lying if I said I was anything over 2 or 3. I can handle, I ride with in training. I ride with saddlebags that have tubes, tires, things like that. I can fix what I would call kind of an immediate action issue that will get me back on the road, that will at least get me home or get me to the bike shop. But anything that requires some mechanical knowledge, I'm eager to learn. And so, what my crew has done for me, in terms of, for example, Rich from Great Basin Bicycles, he saved my ass. Literally, he stopped his race, and they were in the heat of a moment to stop his relay race. All 4 of the racers got out of their van, took his own tools and things, and fixed my bike so that I could attempt to just go even another mile. I quickly realized, one, I mean, I was blown away, but two, also, I need to step up my game. And so for these next larger events, I'll definitely have somebody with some knowledge, experience, and I'll have the tools on hand to solve problems. Because I think you and I both know Murphy's Law: anything that can go wrong will go wrong. And I had just had my bike serviced before I was out, at that race. And, obviously I damn near snapped my chain, broke my rear derailleur, etc. So, things like that. You can't always fix it on the spot, but you can figure out another way to keep moving forward. So I'm looking to potentially get involved with some of these online courses through the different bike manufacturers, or the bike specialty manufacturers, like whether that be Shimano or ETAP or whatever, so I can learn how the process actually works. And if I need to fix something myself, I want to become more self-reliant, just in the off chance that I have to be the one turning the wrench.
Mm. Yeah, it's good that you have that interest to do so, and having the knowledge to get somebody on your crew who has some experience there to help. It makes a big difference. Okay, final question I have for you, Caleb. You've mentioned a number of athletes and people already during our conversation here today. So I'm wondering, who would you want to nominate for a future episode on this show? A story that has inspired you?
I can think of 4 people offhand. Andre, for sure. I want to hear his story. Again, I haven't met him in person, but I think being the first to do anything, and then at that extreme of doing it on a hand cycle, that's a story that should be told. Matt Hoffman, my coach, amazing athlete, amazing person all around. I think he's got a lot of wisdom and experience that can help other people. Same thing with Rob Panzera, his crew chief and the 508 race director. He's helped me a lot, and I think that he would be great in terms of words of wisdom and experience level, and seeing things from another perspective. He's a cyclist himself. I'm not sure in the ultra category, but for example, when I was doing the 24-hour race, he jokingly did 3 workouts during that different time frame, because he knew that I was pedaling for 24 hours, and he thought that he better get some seat time. And then lastly would be my friend Mark Whitehouse, Navy veteran, the only other recumbent tricyclist that does things at the ultra level that I know. And as he goes out to set this world record at Borrego, and then, as he very much an ambassador for us tricyclists to be involved in the UCI regulations, Paralympics, etc. Oh, by the way, he's twice my age and still out getting after it in his low 50s, very much more physically damaged than myself, and still not letting things hold him back. He's got quite the life story and experiences, and I think that he would have a lot to add.
Yeah, sounds like it, Caleb. Thanks for those nominations. Looking forward to hearing all of those stories and many more. But thank you for sharing your story. I know there's much more there that we haven't even covered yet, but I'm sure you'll be able to tell those stories as you continue adventuring forward. And thank you again for your service to the country Any final words that you'd like to give to the audience, perhaps your family, your friends, or anybody else?
I appreciate support. I've had nobody turns me away. If I've also learned that in these events that I haven't finished, if I would have finished, I wouldn't have had the support that I now have. So in a lot of ways, I'm thankful for the DNF, or the did not complete, did not finish, because people realized obviously he's driven, but he probably needs a little bit of guidance. And so, I mean, having people just come out of the woodworks to ensure my success, including my family. And when I did the 24-hour time trials, my wife and kids basically vacated the house for the weekend so that I could do what I needed to do to ensure my success. And my crew chief, probably the person who believes in me the most, Shane Walsh, big shout out to him in driving behind me and driving thousands of miles across the country to make sure that he was ready as an extreme driver, or an ultra driver, if you will. And the support doesn't go unnoticed. I very much appreciate it, as I know I have time away from other things that are important, but life is all a balancing act. So.
Yeah, thanks, Caleb. Looking forward to having you back on the show again, but thanks again for taking the time to chat with me. And everyone watching at home, I hope you found some inspiration in this episode today. And hopefully you'll be able to use some of the advice that Caleb has given to find a way forward in your own life, not using challenges to stop you from going the distance in life or on the road. And we look forward to hearing your story and seeing what Caleb has inspired you to do. So we're looking forward to that. But until next time and next episode, everyone, keep spinning ultra.